The Stanley Cup playoffs kick off with a bang, and the Winnipeg Whiteout is still alive. But for how long? Is this Toronto's year? Things are getting interesting between Washington and Carolina. Are we gonna get a Canadian Stanley Cup final? Meanwhile, Toronto takes on Minnesota again, and it's the playoff debut of the Ottawa Charge. And in Blue Jay news, they survive a sweep of the Los Angeles Angels and Utah. Who? We're discussing all that on this week's episode of Sports for Beginners. My name is Scott McGregor, and Sports for Beginners starts right now. Welcome to Sports for Beginners. This is the show where I cover the Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Blue Jays, and take you on a journey through the world of sports. From the fans' perspective, here is your host, Scott McGregor. Let's have some fun. Good evening on this Friday, May 9th, 2025. My name is Scott McGregor. Welcome in, sports fans of all ages and of all teams, including the Utah. What? Yeah, that's right. We have an official team name for the formerly known Utah Hockey Club. But there's a lot for us to get into, and I sent the starting lineup to our host of On the Ice and Behind the Benches, Thomas McGregor, to give him an idea of how many segments we're doing. As always, we're going to start with our leadoff. Of course, before we get into anything, my name is Scott McGregor. I am the host of this program. This is episode 11 of season 4, which is including a lot of content. We're going to lead off with the biggest news out of the PWHL, most recently before the playoffs began. Welcome to the PWHL Vancouver, and it's time to defend the deep in the PWHL. Welcome to the PWHL, the two new expansion teams in the PWHL. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your newest edition of PWHL teams. Please welcome to the PWHL. Please welcome the PWHL. Please give a warm welcome, PWHL fans. Give a warm welcome to PWHL Seattle and PWHL Vancouver. Huge news coming out of the PWHL that night, or those days, as they have expanded from 6 teams to 8 teams. Oh my goodness me. What a day it is for women's hockey when these 2 teams were announced. What a day it was. Congratulations to Vancouver. Congratulations also to Seattle on getting your shot at playing in the Professional Women's Hockey League. Huge, very huge news. I gotta find now where I put the notes for that, because I have it here, but apparently I can't find it now. All things considered, huge news out of Vancouver and of course Seattle. And speaking of that, I just gotta say congratulations to both cities, both in Canada and the United States, Seattle and of course Vancouver. That is gonna lead us off here. We're gonna talk about the Utah Mammoth during last call, which will be our final segment. But first of all, we want to go into our middle segment where we talk about the PWHL and a Stanley Cup playoff check-in. So our PWHL women's hockey content will continue when we return on Sports for Beginners episode 11 of season 4. We're going to the playoffs in the PWHL. Plus, we're going to a Stanley Cup playoffs check-in. And Blue Jays avoid the sweep of the Angels. What were the final scores? Where do the standings fit the Blue Jays in the AL East? And the Los Angeles Angels, where they are. And of course, before we talk Utah Mammoth, which was the official announcement, that's happening in Last Call. When we also return in Last Call, we're also going to get you set up for next week's show, which is going to be a good one. Will we talk baseball? Probably not, but we're definitely, I don't know if we're talking hockey, but we're definitely going to be talking football. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are, as we are talking to you right now, on May 9th, 2025. We are a Wednesday away from the NFL schedule for 2025-2026 being released. The NFL schedule for this next season will be released on May the 14th, which is this coming Wednesday. What can you expect on that? Stay tuned to the end of the show to find out. I can tell you, however, this includes when you can possibly hear Bills postgame and Dolphins postgame. But enough about that. When we return after this quick word from our good friends over at Sienna T Radio, it's time to check in on the 2024-2025 PWHL playoffs. Plus, how we started with 16 teams to the final 8. Those are Carolina, Washington, Florida, Toronto, Winnipeg, Dallas, and Vegas and Edmonton. Playoff check-in next when we return.
Don't go anywhere. There's more great conversations and content right around the corner. Sports for Beginners will be right back in a moment.
What a busy traffic on this Friday evening. I am almost stuck in this traffic for the last 40 minutes. And there is no way, I think, for me to get to the show. The Sienna T Radio Song Bank, which is going to start very shortly. It's one of my favorite shows. And my, what a way to wind down for the weekend. Perfect 2 hours of fun-filled music. And she has so many great features. Sound of Music, Undercover, Foreign Exchange. Name That Tune. And the big wheel that she spins for Who's That or Where Are We? We cannot forget about the international stage. I have never come across such a great show in my life. I think I will have to press hard on my accelerator and go as fast as I can to get home in time. Wow! Wow! Look! I made it! I am almost there! Sienna T Radio, making your day brighter, one song at a time.
Sienna T Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down. Nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on Sienna T Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on Sienna T Radio.
Now, let's take you back to the action. To the rink and field we go. We find Scott McGregor.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to Ali for that welcome back. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much to Sienna and Ali for their contributions to our show, as we contribute to their show as well. This is episode 11 of season number 4 of Sports for Beginners. Wow, 4 seasons. Yeah, we've had a little bit of a bump. We've had some little bumps in the road, especially when it comes to music and copyright and things like that. We've had some bumps in the road, which have forced us to take down a couple episodes, especially our Christmas finale in our first season of doing this. We had to take that down due to third-party content that was seen, including Christmas songs. But with that being said, let's keep it to what we were talking about right now. So our leadoff was welcome PWHL Seattle and PWHL Vancouver. One thing I was going to mention on that note, besides welcoming the teams to the PWHL as they go from a 6-team league to a 8-team league, both of those two teams that are expanding, the PWHL, Vancouver and Seattle, they will play in the 2025-2026 PWHL draft, but there will be an entry draft, an entry expansion draft held in Ottawa on Tuesday, June the 24th, 2025 at 7 p.m. at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. There also will be an entry draft expansion, but we're going to get some notes on that when we get an opportunity to get those notes. Both teams, as mentioned, they will be playing. Yes, they will be playing in the 2025-2026 regular season, which is set for a total number of games to look out for next season. 100 regular season games for a grand total of 120 regular season games, as each team, including the Ottawa Charge, Montreal Victoire, Toronto Scepters, New York Sirens, Minnesota Frost, Boston Fleet, and the Ottawa Charge, along with Vancouver and Seattle, should they get a name before the season begins for their inaugural season. All 8 teams will be playing 30 games next season. A lot to be determined on that front. But great news, the league is expanding. As you heard in the leadoff, I know we didn't do much on that point, but as you heard in our leadoff of this episode, the league is expanding from 6 teams to 8 teams. All right, it is the middle portion of the show, so let's talk playoffs, shall we? Let's start ladies first. Earlier this week on Wednesday, I should say Thursday. No, I had that right. Wednesday was the start. May the 7th. And so they meet again. Minnesota found a way to punch their ticket to the playoffs and be able to have a shot at defending the Walter Cup. But right now, after losing 3-2 on Wednesday the 7th, earlier this week, they find themselves having to force Game 4 in a best-of-5 series. Game 2 goes tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, shaping up to be quite a classic. In game number 2, Toronto leads the series 1-0. Goals in the game by Captain Blair Turnbull, Julia Gosling, who had 2 of them, Britta C.S., and Katie Knoll. Katie, if I pronounce your last name wrong, sincerest apologies. Penalty takers in this game. No penalties were taken in the third, but Britta received a game misconduct in game number 1. That was served by Katie by Katie Knoll, Ali Monroe, Brooke McGee, and Daryl Watts also receiving some penalties. In the first period, the penalties went to just Minnesota, Grace Zumwinkle. That series started on Wednesday. On Thursday, yesterday, surprise, surprise, no rematch here. Ottawa outlasts Boston, and of course New York missing the playoffs for the second time in their existence in the PWHL. They have yet to make their first playoff appearance, but they missed the playoffs again, and joining them for the first time since the inaugural season began in 2024. Well, Boston misses the playoffs this year, but I thought they had a pretty good record. So you got Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Minnesota. Those are the final four that will compete this year for the Cup, the Walter Cup. Right now, the series in favor of Ottawa against Montreal. They will kickstart a doubleheader on Sunday, May 11th, which is Mother's Day, at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And then at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, Toronto and Minnesota have game number 3 go that night. It's the first game, and maybe only game, depending on what happens tonight at Coca-Cola Coliseum, that Minnesota and Toronto will play in. But we remember what happened last year. If we remember what happened last year, Minnesota forced Game 5 in 2024 in their playoff series with Toronto, the first time these two squadrons would meet. In the end, Minnesota would win 3-2 in a best-of-5 series. Montreal would get clean swept, I should say, at 3-0, but they had to work for it. Boston had to work for it, and then of course Boston losing 3-2 in the PWHL finals in the inaugural playoffs, which were in 2024. This year, Boston is not there, and so is not New York, but it's Montreal against Ottawa, and Minnesota and Toronto find themselves back at it again. Second meeting of the franchise's history between the two clubs. It's the second meeting in the playoffs between Ottawa, Toronto, I should say, and Minnesota. And right now, Toronto is leading the series 1 game to 0, I should say. Ottawa is leading Montreal 1-0. They beat Montreal 3-2 as well. That was on Thursday. Again, game number 2 of that one goes at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, Sunday afternoon. Minnesota and Toronto follow shortly later at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central. Before we touch on the Stanley Cup playoffs, programming note for anyone listening to Sienna T Radio as the show gets started at 7 p.m. tonight. It is another edition of the Song Bank. The Song Bank is on, and it's live tonight, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 to 8 p.m. Central, 7 to 9 p.m. I should say Eastern, 6 to 8 p.m. Central. And of course, you all know the drill if you check out Sienna's social platforms for elsewhere in the time zones. I, of course, once we're out of here with this show, will be taking a chance to tune in. Who knows? Maybe I'm also not watching PWHL hockey, but maybe I'm following tonight's game, I should say. There's only one game on tonight in the PWHL, and that's Minnesota and Toronto. But all things considered, I'm probably going to be following that game, and most likely will be. Yes, the Song Bank is tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Of course, we cannot, and I mean cannot, forget about some special news coming out of Sienna T Radio. Shout out to my boy Nick, and shout out to Sienna. We got a lot of great content coming on, because guess what? It is very, very, very exciting. Yes, that's right. Very, very, very exciting. Very, very exciting news, as we will be having an anniversary for the Melting Pot this Saturday, May 10th, 2025. According to what Sienna says on this update here. Wait, dear listeners, that's not all, folks. We can't forget 3 other exciting programs coming your way on Saturday, May 10th, 2025. It says April the 26th, 2025, but it's actually May 5th. Starting off the Saturday lineup with our very own Nick Blazewicz. He will take the DJ booth to bring you the melting pot from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. Central, 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. UK time, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. in the France time. This show is where Nick plays music from here, there, and everywhere. Songs that you've heard before, as well as others that you may have not heard. Plus, lots of rare finds and much laughter and banter along the way. Now, why is it so exciting on Nick's show? It's the 3rd year anniversary of the Melting Pot. Happy anniversary, Nick. Hope you enjoy Mother's Day weekend this weekend. And of course, I really hope that we have a great show on Saturday. Same thing could be said for Samantha and Robert, and of course Sienna herself. Everybody, including our good buddy Ali, he does wonderful programs on Broadcast Map and everything in between. Great shows, even book panels. Lots of great stuff. Really good stuff that we gotta check out. We just got to. All right. We're running on time for the Stanley Cup. Let's quickly give you a brief round of our first round in the Cup final in 2025. The Dallas Stars, who are playing the Winnipeg Jets, defeated the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games to move on. Winnipeg did the same with St. Louis. Final scores in the series of round 1 for Winnipeg and St. Louis. 4-3 Winnipeg over St. Louis. Dallas beating the Avalanche 4-3 as well. On the other side of the coin, in round 1, the Vegas Golden Knights knocked off Marc-Andre Fleury and the Minnesota Wild 4-2. The Edmonton Oilers did the same to the LA Kings, winning 4 games out of 2. 4-2, I should say. So now Edmonton, currently, they lead that series 2-0 against Vegas. For Winnipeg, they trail the Dallas Stars 1-0. We're all tied up between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals. Both the Capitals and the Hurricanes won their first round matchup 4-1. Speaking of 4-1, the team that faces the Toronto Maple Leafs, who defeated Ottawa in 4-2. Well, that was the series. They didn't defeat them in 4 games. That would have been 4-0. Come to think of it, nobody in the first round defeated anybody 4-0. So it's 4-2 Toronto over Ottawa to eliminate the Ottawa Senators. Florida defeated Tampa Bay 4-1. They now trail 2-0 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And for the defending Stanley Cup champions, here's a fun stat for you. The last time the Toronto Maple Leafs defeated the reigning defending Stanley Cup champions was the year they also won the Cup, back in 1997 in the playoffs. Sorry, not 97, 67, excuse me. So the Seattle Kraken are not the only team in the history of the NHL to do this kind of thing. Toronto has done it before, but not recently. Speaking of the Seattle Kraken, shout out to my good friend over at Locked On Kraken, Erica Lindsay Ayala. Catch her and Rachel Donner on the Women's Hockey Report, available wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and of course, always available under the Locked On NHL podcast. Stream it live on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, quick Stanley Cup and PWHL playoff rundowns of the schedule. Tonight, Game 3 of the Toronto and Florida series goes. Game time is 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Then at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, the Stars look to go up 2-0 on the Winnipeg Jets in the Winnipeg Whiteout. Meanwhile, in the PWHL, one game on the slate tonight. Minnesota looks to get back at Toronto before they move that series from Toronto to Minnesota in St. Paul at the XL Energy Center. Coverage will begin at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Up next on on Sports for Beginners, when we return, Blue Jays avoid the sweep of the Angels. A look at the MLB standings. My thoughts on that series. Plus, who else is playing tonight as the Blue Jays open up a Mother's Day extravaganza weekend set with the Seattle Mariners later on tonight at 9:40 p.m. Eastern. Standings from the MLB. MLB scores, thoughts on Angels Blue Jays, as in key takeaways, and of course, I'll give you some of my early thoughts on the Utah Mammoth. All of that when Sports for Beginners continues. We're on our way to last call, so don't you dare. No, that was kind of rough. So stay with us. I'll say stay with us. That was kind of rude when I said don't you dare. So stay with us. Sports for Beginners will continue right after this.
Don't go anywhere. There's more great conversations and content right around the corner. Sports for Beginners will be right back in a moment.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo. Two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Hello? How are you, my friend? Why? What's the matter? Why feeling bored and lonely? Look at me. I am always happy. The only reason I can tell you, it's because I listen to CNT Radio. All the best shows you can think of. The Melting Pot, the Cosmopolitan Culture Club, and the Song Bank. There are also many more new shows to come. Please make sure to visit her website at http://sienna-wordpress.com/sienna-radio. Oh, now I can hear you more cheerful. CNT Radio, making your day brighter, one song at a time.
Looking for a good hockey podcast that covers your favorite hockey teams and mine? Check out On the Ice and Behind the Benches, where we chat about our favorite hockey teams from puck drop to the last play of the action. To learn more, follow the On the Ice and Behind the Benches Facebook page. Search On the Ice and Behind the Benches.
Now, let's take you back to the action. To the rink and field we go. We find Scott McGregor.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Sports for Beginners, the podcast. Sports for Beginners, Season 4, Episode 11. Just a quick note here from our AI producer, or our AI notes for the show notes, that you will see in the description of the episode. The PWHL started with 6 teams, but the playoffs will start with 4 teams and only have 2 at the end. The PWHL itself has expanded from 6 teams to 8 teams. What does that mean for the PWHL playoffs next year? Well, for one, it could mean a different playoff bracket. 2, maybe 3 teams miss the playoffs and an extra one is added into the playoffs. No, that wouldn't make sense. Maybe just 1 team misses the playoffs, but 2 more get in. I don't know. We'll see what Jaina and the gang at the PWHL board of directors and, of course, all the hockey operations. We'll see what they want to do with the playoffs. Speaking of the PWHL, of course, before we get into the Stanley Cup that we just got into earlier, I'm going to talk about baseball in just a moment. Want the latest on all things PWHL? Want to check it out post-game after a playoff game? Jocks and Jills on the PWHL YouTube channel is your home to catch it live with Tessa and Julia. And no, I'm not talking about Julia. And no, I'm not talking about Julia Gosling. Jocks and Jills is a podcast specifically designed for the PWHL. And you can catch all of their 30 and 50 episodes in each of their seasons right now on the PWHL YouTube channel. Looking for the handle? You could go to at the PWHL/podcast. Also use youtube.com/at the PWHL/podcasts to select the season you want to listen to. Or go to youtube.com/at the PWHL/streams. Well, PWHL official/streams. Tonight, the girls will be reacting to Game 2 of Frost and Scepters, but we'll talk about that more in a bit. They will be reacting to all games, all playoff long. I don't know specifically if they will be reacting to the games going down in... I don't know if they'll be reacting to the games going on down in the finals, but we will see. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We will see. All right. Action tonight in the Stanley Cup playoffs, by the way, again, is Toronto taking on Florida. Toronto looking to go 1 game away from ending the Florida Panthers playoff run and making it into the Eastern Conference Final, which means they would be 1 round away from getting that trophy. I am not a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, but getting that trophy that every Canadian who is a Maple Leaf fan has been saying, when are they going to do it? When are they going to do it? 59, 58 years, whoever is counting how many years they haven't won the cup. But if they can get by the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, and whoever wins that Carolina-Washington series and beat that team's winner, they're 1 step closer to Lord Stanley's Cup. 1 game, 1 series at a time. Speaking of series and speaking of games, the Blue Jays, talking baseball now, the Blue Jays wrapped up a 3-game set against the Los Angeles Angels earlier this week. They lost the first 2 of those games, but managed to avoid the sweep. I'll look at our final scores quickly here, as I have the Blue Jays website with the schedule out here as well. If you don't have the schedule yet, you can print the schedule from the website. Just go to, when you're on Blue Jays, on MLB.com/Blue Jays/schedule, just go to where it says 2025 printable schedule, and you should be able to print the schedule. Okay, it's going to take some time here. Oh, okay. You know what? That's okay. I can move back a day or two. So the Blue Jays beat the Angels 8-5 in the finale last night. Chris Bassett would receive the win. Johnson gets the loss. Save went to Chad Green. Okay. On Wednesday, the Angels took game 2, 5-4. Jeff Hoffman got the loss. Burke got the win. And on Tuesday, when this series began, the Angels took that game, which was a 8-3 win. Jimmy Garcia took the loss. Neres got the win. If I'm pronouncing any players' names wrong, my sincerest apologies. Alright, so before I get into my thoughts on the series, and I'll just be the first to say to everyone who loves the Blue Jays, I am so glad the Blue Jays were able to take 1 out of 3 against the Angels. I would have loved it if they took 2 out of 3, but then again, you're facing a team bottom of the standings in the regular season in a different division, which is the AL West. And if you get caught looking at the standings, let's just say things can turn on you in a heartbeat. Now, speaking of playing teams in the standings and in other divisions, they will have another AL West opponent tonight as they begin a 3-game series on Mother's Day weekend, which is this Saturday and Sunday. Mother's Day is on Sunday. And then, of course, we got the 12th, which is a Monday. But for all those listening right now, as we enter the Mother's Day weekend, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to everyone. Hope you enjoy your weekend. And, of course, just looking at our standings here one more time, I'll get to the games of conversation just before we wrap up this segment. And, of course, when we get to last call, we'll come back to the NHL and the PWHL. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Utah Mammoth. That is our last call conversation for this one. The Blue Jays are 3rd right now in the division at 17-20 coming into the series against the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners, speaking of, are 22-14. The New York Yankees are 21-16. The Red Sox 20-19. Boston and New York atop of the AL East. The Tampa Bay Rays and the Baltimore Orioles are right behind the Blue Jays at 16-21. And the Orioles record, by the way, is 13-23. In Seattle's division, the Los Angeles Angels are 15-21. The Mariners, who are top the division, are 22-14 as mentioned. The Athletics 20-18. The Houston Astros are 18-18, and the Texas Rangers are 18-20. In the AL Central, Tigers are the leaders at 25-13. The Cleveland Guardians behind them at 22-15. Kansas City is at 23-16. Minnesota 18-20. The White Sox are 10-28. But again, the City Royals are 23-16. 22-15 are the Guardians. 25-13 are the Tigers. So that's the AL West, Central and East. What are the games tonight? Well, and of course, weather permitting, action all gets started at 6:40 p.m. Eastern. In just about a couple of moments from now, we will get the Braves taking on the Pirates. The Tigers will take on the Rangers. The Nationals will take on the Cardinals at 6:45 p.m. Eastern. Then at 7 o'clock, we've got the Tampa Bay Rays hosting the Brewers. The Cubs are in New York to take on the Mets. The Phillies are at Progressive Field to take on the Guardians. Red Sox are in Kansas City. Game times are 7:05, 7:10, 7:40. Of course, the same time for the Marlins and the White Sox. 7:40 p.m. Eastern. At 8 o'clock, we got at 8:10 the Reds and the Astros. Also at 8:10, we've got the Giants and the Twins. At 8:40, the Padres take on the Rockies. At 9:38, we've got Orioles taking on the Angels. At 9:40, the Blue Jays will take on the Mariners. The Dodgers will face the Diamondbacks. And at 10:05 p.m. Eastern, we've got the Athletics hosting the Yankees, and the Athletics again are what? 20-18? Wow, what a turnaround. We're going to call them the Athletics because they used to be called the Oakland Athletics, but there's also word around that they're going to be moving to Sacramento and, of course, be under a team name or a city name eventually later, maybe in Las Vegas or so. But we're going to call them the Athletics. What a turnaround, though. I mean, it is kind of still early, but again, the All-Star break is on its way in 2 months' time. So there's a lot that still can happen. All right. Thoughts on the series. You know what? If I'm being completely honest, ladies and gentlemen, I like that the Jays were able to get 1 out of 3. But like I said before, if the Blue Jays were able to slam the door on the Angels in game number 2, they'd probably take 2 out of 3 coming out of Thursday's 8-5 win. So what can I expect from the Mariners? Well, first of all, let's rewind. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's rewind back to that series in Toronto. Blue Jays took 1 of 3. They beat the Mariners on City Connect Fridays at Rogers Center on April the 18th. Lost Saturday and Sunday 8-4 and then 8-3. Oh, and by the way, they also got swept by the Astros later on. All right, now we go to the series in Seattle that starts tonight. I don't have too many expectations, but I'll give you a prediction. I think if the Blue Jays are able to win at least 2 games Friday and Saturday, maybe Friday and Sunday. I don't know about Saturday, but maybe Friday and Sunday, I'll be happy with 2 out of 3. But given where you are, you gotta win games. So I'll be happy with a sweep too. Oh, but now I just said it. Hey, good news. Good news. Series hasn't begun yet, but it will begin tonight. That's the good news. The bad news is it might come back to haunt me when we talk to you again, whenever that may be. Most likely it'll be ahead of the Tigers series. We will see. Will that be a Blue Jays game recap? Most likely. And that will be episode 12 of season 4, by the way. So Blue Jays game recap, just like Penguins postgame, getting in on the fun on season 4 content. All right, we got to talk Utah Mammoth. We'll do so on the other side. As last call is approaching, I'll give you some players to watch in tonight's PWHL action between Minnesota and Toronto. But this just in, according to an update I received as we were recording, this just in, the Frost are turning to goaltender Maddie Rudney after Nicole Hensley lost game 1. So they are turning to Maddie Rudney to start against the Scepters in game number 2. We will see how it goes. Key players for this matchup tonight between the Frost and the Scepters, a revamp of the action on the ice in the NHL, and it's time to talk Utah Mammoth when we return with Last Call right around the corner. Stay with us.
Looking for conversations on the world of broadcasting, sports media, and from time to time, my favorite sports teams? Listen to Broadcast Map with me, Ali Musa. To learn more about the show and to view the upcoming schedule,
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo. 2 powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Looking for a sports podcast that covers sports weekly as well as gets you set up for the day? Check out Weekly in Sports with me, Scott McGregor. We give some shout-outs of the week to podcasts like this one and those who do them. Discuss the Blue Jays, Bills, Raptors, and more. To learn more, check out the Sports for Beginners Facebook page. Search Sports for Beginners.
now let's take you back to the action To the rink and field we go. We find Scott McGregor.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Sports for Beginners, episode 11 of season 4. We have talked about the PWHL expanding to 8 teams, from 6 teams to 8 teams, which makes me wonder, who will be the 9th team the PWHL will expand to? Will we get another Canadian team? Will we get another, American team? We've talked about the PWHL playoffs. A reminder that Game 2 between the Frost and the Scepters goes at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Game 2 of Ottawa and Montreal goes at 2 p.m. Eastern Sunday afternoon. Frost and Scepters Game 3 goes at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern Sunday night. Looking forward to a great game there. Of course, the other action around in the NHL, we got the Maple Leafs and the Panthers from Florida at 7 p.m. coming up in just a little bit from now. And the Jets will take on the Stars later on tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern in just about 3 hours' time to the exact. It is 6:29 p.m. as we speak, which means it's also almost time on Sienna T Radio for The Song Bank. A lot of great programming that I'm sure you will not want to miss. It is time for last call before we continue with the PWHL and the NHL. Of course, I gave you my thoughts so far on the Angels series. I didn't really give you any takeaways, but I also provided a prediction for Seattle and Toronto. In Seattle, in the series that takes place in Seattle. And of course, I predicted hopefully 2 out of 3, depending on how the Blue Jays are able to go about winning this one. I feel like against a team like Seattle, which is pretty good. They're a pretty good club. Seattle is a pretty good club this year. The Mariners are a pretty good club this year, based on what their standings say. But all kidding aside, I really like where things could be headed with the Blue Jays should they win. When they win, I will say, all 3 or even 2 games out of 3 against Seattle. Currently, the Blue Jays won 1 game, I should say, in Toronto. They lost the other 2 in Toronto. So a sweep could basically take the entire season series for 2025, but we will see where it all goes down. With that said, the biggest news of the day in the NHL, besides the Stanley Cup playoffs, was the official announcement of the Utah Mammoth. Of course, it wasn't today, obviously, because they announced it a little bit earlier this week, I believe. Yeah, they announced it earlier this week. And I did have a chance to take a look at the press conference, which you can find on the Utah Mammoth YouTube channel. And of course, you could find it on the NHL's YouTube channel as well. This will also include some highlights from all games this series and things of that nature in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And again, to reiterate from the AI notes that I was being shown in the show notes there, to reiterate, that was actually the PWHL started with 6 teams. They are down to 8, but the playoffs always start with 4 teams in, and they wrap around with 2. All right, with that said, a link to the press conference from the NHL side of things for the Utah Mammoth will be put in the description of this episode. And Utah, we finally have a team, an actual team name, but who could have predicted Mammoth would be the go-to name? I certainly wouldn't have predicted it. We know that Yeti was ruled out of the picture earlier in the season, but I won't get too far into that. That could have become the name. And as we all know, for the duration of the time before we actually got this name, Utah Mammoth, we found that we were doing Utah Hockey Club for the duration of the inaugural season for Team Utah. By the way, now that we know that they're called the Mammoth, the Utah Mammoth. I love this hashtag that Utah put out when they said, "Our identity reflects the pride we have for our home, the Utah Mammoth logo system. Tusks up is what the hashtag was. Tusks up is what our hashtag was. The name announcement was 2 days ago, which was May 7th, 2025. That was a Wednesday. Last night was a Thursday, which was May the 8th. Today is May the 9th. You might be catching this on a Saturday, but hey, good news. Still a lot of great content on Sienna T Radio. Speaking of Sienna T Radio, as we move into now my thoughts on Utah Mammoth. Coming up in just a few moments' time, Sienna is going live on the radio station with the Song Bang, which is every alternate Friday, barring commitments that she has elsewhere. Every alternate Friday on Sienna T Radio, rotating in between the Cosmopolitan Culture Club, which is every alternate Thursday. That is from 8 to 9 p.m. And there's lots of music, lots of great content, good stuff for you to enjoy. Looking forward to that. Great music, 2 hours of great music tonight, and music for the weekend. Looking forward to it all. All right. To end off last call today, key players for the Scepters and the Frost to watch. I'm going to be keeping an eye, even if I'm not watching the game, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on tonight's goaltender, Maddie Rudney of the Minnesota Frost. I'm also going to be keeping a very close eye on Claire Thompson on Minnesota. I'm also going to keep an eye on Katie Knoll. And on the Toronto side, besides probably the person that most likely might get the start, in my opinion, this might be it. I don't know if they're switching gears for game 2, but Kristen Campbell, I'm going to be keeping an eye on her. And also on the Toronto Scepters side, I'm keeping an eye on the captain, Blair Turnbull, and Julia Gosling. And how about Hannah Miller? We got to keep an eye on her too. So on the Toronto Scepters side of things, I'm keeping an eye on Hannah Miller, Julia Gosling, Kristen Campbell, and Blair Turnbull. On Minnesota, we're keeping an eye on Maddie Rudney, Claire Thompson, and Katie Knoll. All right, Toronto won the first game of this series 3-2 last time, which was on Wednesday, May the 7th, 2025. Will Minnesota tie the series tonight? We shall see. Mehdi Philippe Poulin and her gang try to even the series, speaking of which, with the Ottawa Charge. In the early afternoon doubleheader before Minnesota and Toronto, look for a Game 3 win. If Minnesota wins tonight, Toronto will try to go up 2-1. In the end, it's the first to 3 in a best-of-5 series. In a best-of-7, it's the first to 4. You can watch tonight's game of the PWHL action on Prime in Canada and on FanDuel Sports Network outside of Canada. Also outside of Canada, you can watch it on the PWHL YouTube channel. And of course, you can watch it on the PWHL website at thepwhl.com. Those are for out of Canada, but if you're in Canada, make sure you're subscribed to Prime, because that's where you'll be able to catch tonight's action and all of the action between Toronto and Minnesota. Also in the United States, besides YouTube and of course the PWHL website, tune on in to FanDuel Sports Network. And don't forget, right after the game, to tune in to Jocks and Jills live on the PWHL YouTube channel. They are your home for PWHL postseason reactions and recaps. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Sports for Beginners. But before we go, what's coming up next time on Sports for Beginners? On episode 12 or possibly 13? Well, on episode 12, we're going to move our NFL talk to the following week, as the Blue Jays are home. So next week on Blue Jays game recap, it's a Tampa Bay Rays on Sports for Beginners, it's a Tampa Bay Rays versus Toronto Blue Jays program and it's episode 12 of season 4. It'll be a Tampa Bay Rays versus Toronto Blue Jays program. Following the Mother's Day weekend, we'll be recording this ahead of the Detroit Tigers series. Will it drop on that day? We hope so. If not, it will drop on Saturday, the day of Game 2 of Tigers and the Jays. Then the following Friday, I should say, on the 23rd. It will be a week since the season schedule has been released, but we're talking football. That's right. On this episode 13 of season 4, you're going to find out when you can catch Bills postgame, when you can catch Dolphins postgame, and so many more. Lots of great content on Sports for Beginners, CNT Radio, broadcast map, and on the ice and behind the benches. By the way, I hope you enjoy the playoffs in the PWHL. We will be going back into PWHL content for the PWHL finals. PWHL recap on Sports for Beginners will return for the finals of the PWHL. So make sure you check that out. Date to be determined. But in the meantime, keep it locked to the PWHL for all the action, including tonight's action against the Frost between the Toronto Scepters and the Frost. Toronto leads 1-0. In the NHL side, the Maple Leafs lead the Panthers 2-0. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna lose? Who is gonna move on? That to be determined in games time. One thing we know for certain, Toronto can move up 2-0 against Minnesota tonight if they can knock them off tonight at home. And as for the Maple Leafs, they can put a stranglehold on the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers if they can win tonight in Sunrise. Enjoy the action. Enjoy music if you're going on to CNT Radio. And above all other things, happy Mother's Day, everybody. Enjoy the Mother's Day weekend. My name is Scott McGregor, and that is it for this one. Thank you very much for joining us here. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the playoffs. And once again, happy Mother's Day. This has been episode 11 of season 4 of Sports for Beginners. And my name is Scott McGregor saying thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to Sports for Beginners. If you would like to learn more about the show, you can visit the podcast Facebook page or visit the official website. You can also send us an email at sportsforbeginners podcast8231@gmail.com. As we always remind you, it is not goodbye, it is until next time.